On the very first day Sarin moved into her husband's home, her mother-in-law, Ki-dong, already showed signs of unfairness. She gave her daughter-in-law a bowl of leftover rice from the previous days, while serving her son a bowl of freshly cooked hot rice. During the meal, she even picked out fish for her son, while Sarin only received a piece of pickled radish. Though Sarin felt a bit confused, she told herself this must be the kind of married life every new bride has to go through. However, the actions that followed from her husband's family truly made people think twice. Sarin and her husband, Gu-young, graduated from the same university. They happened to meet again while working at different companies and quickly developed feelings for each other. Sarin decided to spend her life with her boyfriend, and not long after, they walked down the aisle together. The sweet honeymoon life made her even more hopeful for the future, believing she had found true love. Unexpectedly, her husband turned out to be an immature man, still heavily dependent on his mother. Everything truly began on Mrs. Ki-dong's birthday. That day, while Sarin was busy working, her phone kept receiving messages from her sister-in-law, Mi-young. Mi-young reminded her that tomorrow was their mother's birthday, but Sarin, being a thoughtful person, could never have forgotten. She had even booked a restaurant in advance. Nevertheless, her sister-in-law hinted that if Sarin cooked a bowl of seaweed soup the next morning, Mrs. Ki-dong would surely be delighted and promised she would definitely help. Even though Sarin had to wake up early for work, she still agreed. Wanting to win her mother-in-law's favor, the naive Sarin and her husband went to her in-laws' house early, even bringing a bouquet of fresh flowers that made Mrs. Ki-dong beam with joy. Seeing Mrs. Ki-dong cutting fruit, she hurriedly stepped forward and offered to do it herself. However, since Sarin was used to being taken care of, she didn't know where to start and had to look up how to cut melon on her phone. Although it was her first time, the result didn't look bad at all. Sarin carried the plate of sliced melon to the living room. At that moment, Mrs. Ki-dong saw that her son looked tired and quickly urged him to go rest in his room. Sarin was about to follow her husband, but Mrs. Ki-dong stopped her. She completely ignored the fact that her daughter-in-law had just come home from work too, keeping her in the living room to talk about her son. The conversation lasted until midnight. By then, Sarin was exhausted, but not wanting to spoil her in-law's mood, she could only occasionally pinch her leg to stay awake, forcing herself to smile and continue the chat. The next morning, before dawn, Sarin was awakened by the alarm clock. Seeing her husband still fast asleep, she planned to wake him to help prepare for the birthday, but Gu-young was sound asleep, snoring loudly. With no other choice, Sarin quietly went down to the kitchen alone, trying not to make any noise so as not to disturb her sleeping in-laws. After several busy hours, a hearty breakfast table was ready, including the seaweed soup Mi-young had suggested. When Mi-young woke up and saw her sister-in-law had finished all the cooking, she looked a bit embarrassed and tried to explain, but the pure-hearted Sarin didn't mind at all. Seeing the table full of food, Mrs. Ki-dong was delighted and quickly called her daughter out to take photos to show off. When the whole family gathered, everyone praised Sarin's diligence and thoughtfulness. Only Gu-young said nothing in encouragement. Perhaps he thought everything his wife did was simply her duty. Then, Mi-young picked up the bowl of seaweed soup and tasted it eagerly. It was only then that Sarin realized the soup wasn't something Mrs. Ki-dong liked. It was Mi-young herself who wanted to eat it. At the dining table, the whole family chatted cheerfully while eating, but Sarin couldn't join in. She didn't know the people they were talking about, so she could only quietly eat her own portion. Even when she couldn't reach the dishes that were far away, no one seemed to notice. Sarin quickly finished her rice. Seeing that, Mrs. Ki-dong subtly criticized her for eating too fast. To ease the uncomfortable atmosphere, Sarin volunteered to go to the kitchen to cut some fruit. At that moment, she received a text from her mother, who was worried about how her daughter's first night at her husband's home had gone. Reading her mother's message made Sarin feel deeply comforted. When she brought the fruit out, Mrs. Ki-dong told her to clear the dishes into the sink, purposely adding that she would wash them later herself. Sarin had to go back and forth several times to finish clearing the table. Meanwhile, everyone else continued chatting happily, with no one offering to help. Although she was yawning and her whole body ached, Sarin still forced herself to finish the task. As for Gu-young, he just patted his stomach and remarked that he was full. By the time Sarin finished washing the pile of dishes, there were only a few slices of kiwi left on the table. Feeling a bit embarrassed, Mrs. Ki-dong said they hadn't saved any for her, and, not wanting to waste it, picked up a piece with a fork and put it directly into Sarin's mouth. At that same birthday gathering, the eldest daughter-in-law, Hyrin, who was pregnant at the time, also joined them at the restaurant. Hearing that the seaweed soup there was delicious, Hyrin suggested ordering a bowl for Mrs. Ki-dong, since according to tradition, it represents gratitude for a mother's care. But Mi-young casually mentioned that Sarin had already made seaweed soup for everyone that morning. Mrs. Ki-dong immediately took the chance to brag about how obedient her daughter-in-law was. Right away, Hyrin sensed something was off and asked whether Sarin had cooked everything by herself. Mi-young quickly made excuses, saying she had accidentally overslept. Mrs. Ki-dong also chimed in, saying her daughter wouldn't even know how to do those kinds of chores. Mi-young even boldly declared that it was only natural for a new daughter-in-law, in her first year of marriage, to prepare breakfast for her mother-in-law. Those words left Hyrin utterly shocked. She immediately spoke up in disagreement, saying there was no such thing as something natural like that, then turned to ask Mrs. Ki-dong if she thought so too. She also pointed out that Sarin had to go to work, and the in-laws' behavior was simply unreasonable. The atmosphere instantly grew tense. A few years earlier, when Hyrin had first married into the family, she and her husband also visited her in-laws' home. Mrs. Ki-dong knew the couple had taken turns driving, yet she told her son to go rest in his room. Meanwhile, preparations for the ancestral memorial dinner were about to begin. None of the men in the family took part, but they told Hyrin, "You also worked and drove all day, so you should stay and help." At that moment, Hyrin saw through everything and calmly pointed out that her husband was tired and needed to sleep. Her father-in-law and uncle were busy drinking, while her brother-in-law and Mi-young had gone out on a date. So did that mean Mrs. Ki-dong was going to prepare all the ceremonial dishes by herself? Hearing that, Mrs. Ki-dong interrupted and reminded Hyrin to properly address the others as uncle and aunt. Hyrin laughed, saying she didn't care much about titles, but it seemed Mrs. Ki-dong believed that as a daughter-in-law, it was naturally her duty to help with the cooking. Seeing the tension rise, the second son quickly made an excuse to leave. Mi-young muttered in annoyance as she got into her boyfriend's car, mocking Hyrin's tone, and her boyfriend even agreed that those chores were what daughters-in-law were supposed to do. The atmosphere in the house became extremely awkward. Breaking the silence, Hyrin turned to her husband and said she was right all along, reminding him not to forget his promise. Mrs. Ki-dong curiously asked what promise that was, but Hyrin simply said goodbye and announced she was leaving. Guin hurried after her, asking if she really intended to walk out like that. Hyrin replied that this confrontation was bound to happen sooner or later, and she trusted him to handle it properly. Summoning his courage, Guin went back into the kitchen and started preparing food for the memorial table. Seeing this, his mother said, "You don't know how to do anything. You'll just make a mess in the kitchen." Guin argued that Hyrin didn't know how to do those things either. His mother replied that if Hyrin didn't know, she could teach her step by step. Guin immediately responded that he could also learn step by step. Nam-chun stood up angrily and scolded Guin, but he remained determined to reason with his parents. He said that preparing memorial rites was the responsibility of the entire family and should not become the duty of the daughters-in-law alone, and that everyone should participate together. Before he could finish, his mother scolded him harshly, saying that Hyrin was too arrogant. Nam-chun grew furious, believing his son had been completely dominated by his wife and had lost his dignity. Guin firmly stated that he loved Hyrin and that she was now his family. He knew his parents might be upset, but as the head of his household, he had to prioritize caring for his own family first. He then announced that from now on, during future holidays, he would return home alone. However, for birthdays or other family gatherings, he and Hyrin would still help out, since she wasn't the kind of person to ignore family obligations. Only for the ancestral rites, each household will handle its own. That was the decision he and Hyrin had carefully discussed together. Returning to Mrs. Ki-dong's birthday party, after Hyrin spoke up, Mrs. Ki-dong shifted the topic to childbirth. She asked whether Hyrin planned to give birth naturally. A relative said of course she should, questioning why anyone would need medical intervention. Mrs. Ki-dong added that naturally born children were smarter. She went on to declare that her son couldn't handle witnessing such scenes and that a man should focus on his career. She told Hyrin to call her when labor started and only contact her son once everything was over. Throughout this time, Hyrin stayed silent, calmly eating and ignoring the remarks. Seeing she was being ignored, Mrs. Ki-dong pressed further, insisting that giving birth didn't require the husband to be present. If it affected his work, his boss wouldn't be happy. Sitting beside her, Sarin was stunned that Mrs. Ki-dong could say such things. At that moment, Hyrin took a deep breath and steadied her emotions. She looked at Mrs. Ki-dong and asked if that was truly her opinion. She thanked her for the advice, but firmly stated that this was something she and her husband would discuss and decide together. The entire in-law family was stunned by Hye-rin's reaction. After the party, on the drive home, Sarin asked her husband about her sister-in-law. Gu-young described Hye-rin as a rather independent woman with strong opinions and said that his family didn't like her. He also warned Sarin not to follow Hye-rin's example because his mother wouldn't want that. Gu-young added that since his brother seemed happy, the family had decided to overlook it. Meanwhile, in the other car, Gu-in was full of praise for Sarin, saying she was obedient and sensible. Hearing that, Hye-rin teasingly asked if he meant that she was like a bad woman. Gu-in hurriedly denied it, saying he meant the two of them were just very different. Hye-rin brought up last year's Chuseok, when she was still in her trial period as a daughter-in-law. She said that if she hadn't broken free back then, things would have turned out terribly. Clearly, Hye-rin still couldn't forget that experience at her in-laws' house. The following evening, Sarin and Gu-young went to his parents' home again for dinner. This time, Mrs. Ki-dong was the one cooking. She continued to show favoritism by serving the men freshly cooked rice while giving Sarin leftovers from the previous day. At the table, Sarin presented Mrs. Ki-dong with a shopping gift card. The older woman accepted it quickly while pretending to be polite, saying there was no need for such gestures next time. When serving food, she gave fish and meat to her son but picked a piece of pickled radish for Sarin, commenting that eating sour foods helped one conceive a son. After dinner, Sarin brought out a dessert she had bought to share with everyone. However, Mrs. Ki-dong scolded her for being wasteful and not knowing how to manage money. At that moment, Gu-young stepped in to defend his wife. He said that Sarin had a heavier workload than he did, and that she also earned quite a lot. When Sarin mentioned she would have to go on a 4-day business trip, Mrs. Ki-dong immediately voiced her disapproval. She asked who would take care of her son's meals while she was away, saying that a married woman shouldn't travel for work that long, and told her to find an excuse to refuse the trip. Gu-young had to explain that the company sending Sarin on a business trip was proof of her capability. His father also told Sarin to be understanding toward Mrs. Ki-dong, since she had never worked before. Right after that, the in-laws suggested that Gu-young move back home for a few days while his wife was away. Those words made Sarin feel deeply burdened. After the couple left, Mrs. Ki-dong finally revealed the real reason. She was worried because her son, despite working for many years, had never been assigned a business trip. She feared that if her daughter-in-law started earning more money, her son would be looked down upon. That was why she wanted to put pressure on Sarin. One rainy morning, Sarin planned to stay home and rest with her husband, but Gu-young suddenly announced that it was his grandfather's Memorial Day. Coincidentally, the same day as another child's first birthday celebration. He casually told Sarin to go to his parents' house first to help with preparations, saying he wouldn't be of any help anyway since he had never done housework. Sarin found this reason ridiculous. She asked if he had just said he was helping her. She pointed out that she had never even met the grandfather being honored, so technically she was the one helping him. But Gu-young didn't see it that way. While getting ready to leave, Sarin was still upset. Gu-young then promised that once they arrived, she wouldn't have to do anything. He would help her himself. Hearing that, Sarin finally calmed down and went with him. But everything changed quickly. As soon as she greeted everyone and sat down, Mrs. Ki-dong pulled her into the kitchen and handed her an apron she had already prepared. This time, Gu-young was about to roll up his sleeves to help, but his mother immediately stopped him, telling him to go outside and ordering Sarin not to make her son do chores. Gu-young looked embarrassed, while Sarin, though extremely uncomfortable inside, could only stay silent and comply. Meanwhile, the men in the family sat around drinking tea and waiting for the meal. Seeing Sarin's uneasy expression, Mrs. Ki-dong warned her that if she didn't do things properly, she'd have to redo them. She even deliberately remarked how much easier things would be if the eldest daughter-in-law were there. An uncle overheard the conversation and criticized Hye-rin for not coming home to help. Mrs. Ki-dong, knowing well that Hye-rin refused to return because she didn't accept the rule that only women should do housework, quickly lied that Hye-rin was close to giving birth and had difficulty moving around. The uncle still complained that the elder sister-in-law was inconsiderate, leaving the younger one to handle everything alone. Hearing this, Sarin couldn't help but start feeling some resentment toward her sister-in-law. Meanwhile, at home, Hye-rin was so exhausted that she could barely stand. Seeing that, her husband quickly helped her to the sofa and gently massaged her legs. Feeling a bit guilty, Hye-rin asked if they should go over to help, but Gu-in immediately refused, saying that if they didn't go for holidays, there was no need to go for memorial rites either. He had already told the family that their baby could arrive at any moment. After a long and tiring day, the ceremony finally ended. On the way home, Sarin and her husband argued about what had happened. She couldn't understand why he avoided doing any household chores. Guyoung explained that since he had never helped before, if he suddenly did now, his mother would think Sarin had influenced him. He even claimed that by not doing anything, he was actually helping his wife, so she wouldn't be disliked by Mrs. Ki-dong. Sarin couldn't believe the man she loved not only failed to protect her, but even blamed her for being unfilial. Furious, she opened the car door and walked away. She went into a cafe, ordered 2 drinks, hoping her husband would come after her, but he never did. At that moment, Hyrin called. She said she had 2 musical tickets she couldn't use and wanted to give them to Sarin. Still angry, Sarin misunderstood, thinking Hyrin felt guilty for not helping earlier and was offering them out of apology. She told her sister-in-law that there was no need to do that. Hyrin was momentarily stunned, realizing Sarin was upset, possibly believing she had purposely stayed away. She calmly explained that she offered the tickets simply because the seats were great and it would be a waste not to use them, not because she felt guilty. She honestly said she didn't feel any obligation to go to her in-laws' house and do that kind of work. After a brief exchange, Hyrin hung up, but deep down, she couldn't help feeling a faint unease. Perhaps not going back wasn't as easy or as justified as she wanted to believe. Sometime later, at the 100-day celebration for Hyrin's daughter, Mrs. Ki-dong saw her son holding the baby while standing and eating, whereas her daughter-in-law sat comfortably enjoying her meal. She was displeased, thinking that caring for a child was a woman's duty and that a man shouldn't be the one holding the baby. She spoke up, telling her son to hand the baby over so he could eat properly. Guin laughed and said, "I eat fast. It's fine for me to watch the baby." Mrs. Ki-dong then remarked with a hidden meaning, "If you're taking care of the baby like that, what do you need a wife for?" Guin didn't catch the sarcasm and cheerfully boasted that he could change diapers, sterilize bottles, bathe the baby, and that such things were perfectly manageable for any father. Hyrin immediately recognized the undertone in her mother-in-law's words, realizing Mrs. Ki-dong was indirectly criticizing her. To keep the peace, she quietly let it go. However, her father-in-law, Mr. Nam Chun, brought up an awkward topic by asking when the couple planned to have a second child. Guin quickly stepped in for his wife, saying that 1 child was enough for them. But Mr. Nam Chun wouldn't let it go, insisting that they must have a son to carry on the family line. His words made both Hyrin and Sarin, who were eating nearby, freeze for a moment. Not wanting to argue over such outdated thinking, Hyrin quietly picked up her baby and left the table. As soon as Hyrin left, Mrs. Ki-dong immediately turned her attention to Sarin. An aunt in the family joined in, lecturing her about the benefits of having children while still young. While Sarin was flustered and unsure how to respond, Guyoung suddenly spoke up. Wanting to please his parents, he promised that within 3 months, they would have a grandchild to hold. His words made Mr. and Mrs. Ki-dong overjoyed. Sarin, however, found herself cornered by the entire family, each of them saying something that left her feeling extremely embarrassed. She made an excuse to step outside and talk to Hyrin, expressing her admiration for her sister-in-law's ability to return to work so soon. Hyrin candidly said she was really looking forward to it, because it meant she would finally have someone to talk to, and could even go to the bathroom alone. She explained that although she loved her child deeply, she still wanted to have her own life and not be completely bound by motherhood. Though Sarin couldn't fully relate, she deeply respected her sister-in-law's decisiveness. The 100-day celebration ended after everyone took family photos together. Sarin posted one of the pictures online and soon received a comment from her sister-in-law Mi-young, saying they should meet up more often. This only made Sarin feel more pressured. She felt surrounded by her in-laws on all sides, with no personal space left, not even online. So she reposted the photo on another private account, adding a few complaints about her mother-in-law, and quickly received many supportive comments from friends. That night, as Sarin quietly gazed at the moon, she suddenly realized that the Mid-Autumn Festival was only 2 days away. It was supposed to be a time for family reunion, yet it was the occasion she dreaded most, because she knew she would once again be buried in kitchen work. It was at that very moment that the thought of divorce first crossed her mind. During the Mid-Autumn Festival, before dawn broke, Sarin was awakened by the sound of Mrs. Ki-dong chopping vegetables. Guyoung, who had promised to get up early and help, was still sound asleep beside her, so Sarin irritably went to the kitchen alone. Fortunately, her second uncle's family had also arrived, so most of the ingredients were already prepared. When her cousin's wife came over carrying her daughter to greet everyone, Mrs. Kidong said there was nothing to do but immediately assigned them more tasks. A while later, Guyoung finally woke up and, feeling responsible, went to the kitchen to take over from Sarin. However, Mrs. Kidong scolded him for making a mess in the kitchen and pushed him out. Standing nearby, Sarin felt extremely awkward. At that moment, Mr. Namchun called Guyoung to fix the computer. Once her son had left, Mrs. Kidong muttered, "What does he even know how to do anyway?" Her words made Sarin feel even more disheartened, while her cousin, who witnessed everything, stayed silent. Not long after, the children and men from the second and third uncle's families all arrived, but strangely, only the men and kids came. It turned out the aunt had sprained her ankle, so the third uncle had to stay home to take care of her. Though Mrs. Kidong outwardly said, "It's fine," her face clearly showed displeasure. The second uncle politely thanked her for all her hard work, but Mr. Namchun remarked that what she was doing was only natural. After the ancestral ritual ended, Sarin was utterly exhausted from the busy morning. Seeing this, Guyoung told his wife to take a rest. He even promised that after the meal, they would go visit Sarin's mother, Mrs. Young-hee, who was home alone, and that he would handle the dishwashing. However, when Sarin came out of the kitchen, she was stunned to see everyone already eating. The scene before her shocked her. All the men were sitting at the main table enjoying a grand meal, while the women were sitting in a small corner. Mrs. Kidong explained that there simply wasn't enough space at the table. After that, another strange incident happened. When the third uncle's son tried to scoop rice for himself, Mrs. Kidong immediately stopped him, asking, "Why is a boy entering the kitchen?" and told him to hand over the bowl so she could get it instead. Seeing the situation, Sarin quickly stood up, took the bowl, and went into the kitchen. After the meal, only Guyoung took the initiative to help clean up. The boys were busy playing video games, while a 5-year-old girl was wiping the table with a cloth. The older men saw this and praised her, saying, "She'll surely marry into a good family one day." Hearing that, the girl's mother thought of her own husband who never lifted a finger at home, and she suddenly exploded, leaving without a word, dragging her daughter along and calling her husband to go home with them. At that moment, Mrs. Kidong returned and was shocked to see Guyoung washing dishes in the kitchen. She immediately raised her voice at Sarin, scolding her for letting her precious son's hands touch oil and grease. Sarin just wanted to finish quickly so she could visit her mother. But just then, Myung's family arrived. Seeing her son-in-law, Chul-soo, Mrs. Kidong's face lit up with joy, and she immediately signaled for Sarin to serve them. What frustrated Sarin even more was that Guyoung, who had just promised to visit his mother-in-law, was now sitting comfortably watching sports with his brother-in-law. When Sarin finally finished all the chores and the couple was about to leave, Mrs. Kidong began to complain again. She said that if Sarin really wanted to visit her mother, she should have done it a week earlier. During the holiday, she ought to stay and gather with her husband's family. Her words left Sarin speechless. Guyoung quickly tried to ease the tension, saying that his mother was only joking. Only then did Mrs. Kidong allow the couple to leave. On the way home, Sarin remained silent and unhappy, her body so exhausted that she felt like she was about to fall ill. Guyoung didn't notice at all. He kept talking nonstop about how Mrs. Young-hee's cooking is always so good. Seeing that his wife looked unwell, he casually asked if she had a headache, then indifferently added that she didn't seem to do much today anyway. When they got home, Sarin collapsed onto the bed, still feeling upset over all the unfairness. Just then, Mrs. Kidong called, asking the couple to come back for dinner. Guyoung still didn't realize how tired his wife was. He asked if she wanted to go back, but Sarin said she was exhausted and wanted to rest at home. However, not wanting to disappoint his mother, Guyoung insisted they should go. Sarin objected, saying that if they went back, she would just end up cooking again. The two began to argue, and Sarin finally couldn't hold it in any longer. She confronted her husband, asking if he was sure she wouldn't have to do anything if they went. She questioned, "What's the difference between a daughter-in-law and a son-in-law? And why do I have to serve Chul-soo too?" Guyoung brushed it off, saying, "It wasn't that hard today." Sarin shot back, asking if, when they went back, Chul-soo would be the one cooking for them. Angry, Guyoung told her that if she didn't want to go, then fine. He stormed out, thinking, "It's just cooking a meal. What's the big deal?" On his way back to his parents' house, Guyoung thought about how his aunt couldn't make it and how his mother had worked hard all day. Wiping away a tear, he suddenly felt sorry for her. But he completely forgot that Sarin, who had also been exhausted all day, was now home alone with a high fever. Struggling to get up, she searched for some medicine and accidentally came across their wedding video. In it, she was smiling brightly, full of hope for married life. When Gu-young arrived at his parents' house, he ran into Mi-young, who was out for a walk. Mi-young immediately guessed that he and Sarin had just argued. Gu-young asked why she wasn't at her husband's home. Mi-young reacted sharply, asking him, "Are you out of your mind?" She added that because Gu-young came back, her husband would now definitely force her to return to her in-laws' house. Mi-young warned him never to come back on these kinds of days again. Gu-young was stunned. He never expected his sister to think the same way as Sarin. Meanwhile, upstairs, Mrs. Ki-dong, feeling tired, was about to rest. Upon hearing that Sarin wasn't coming, she told her husband, Mr. Nam-chun, to order food from outside. Mr. Nam-chun immediately refused, saying outside food was unhygienic and unhealthy, and told her to just make a few simple mixed dishes instead. At that point, Mrs. Ki-dong finally exploded. She complained that her husband knew she had spent the entire day preparing offerings, yet didn't suggest eating out earlier. Furious, she stormed out for a walk. When Gu-young entered the house, he saw his father sitting cross-legged, watching TV. Neither of them knew how to cook. Gu-young asked why he didn't go for a walk with his mother. Mr. Nam-chun grumbled, criticizing his wife for wanting to eat out when there was already plenty of food at home. Gu-young defended his mother, saying she'd been tired all day and there was nothing wrong with eating out. Mr. Nam-chun replied that Gu-young should have brought Sarin back with him. Gu-young immediately lost his temper, asking if his wife's only purpose was to cook meals. Muttering that cooking wasn't such a big deal anyway, he also left. On the TV, a news report was playing about the rising breakup rates among Korean couples, a number that always spiked during holidays. As he went downstairs, Gu-young happened to overhear Mi-young and Chul-soo arguing. Chul-soo wanted his wife to go back to his house to help his mother, but Mi-young firmly refused, saying that every time she went, she ended up completely exhausted. Chul-soo said that the Mid-Autumn Festival only came once a year, but Mi-young immediately listed a series of other once-a-year events, like both parents' birthdays, Parents' Day, Kimchi-making day, and ancestral memorials. She said she couldn't take it anymore and suggested they end things. Just then, Mrs. Ki-dong returned home. She was shocked to witness her son-in-law, Chul-soo, behaving inappropriately toward Mi-young. It turned out that Chul-soo's business had failed, and he hadn't contributed any living expenses for the entire year. He stayed home playing video games while being burdened with debt. All household costs had been shouldered by Mi-young. Yet whenever she went to her in-laws' house, she was still treated like a servant. Mrs. Ki-dong refused to hear any explanation from Chul-soo. She quickly stepped in to protect her daughter and took Mi-young home. As soon as they arrived, Mr. Nam-chun scolded them for coming back late. Mrs. Ki-dong pulled her daughter into the room. Mi-young finally confessed everything: the failed business, the loan, the mortgaged house, and how Chul-soo had changed. Crying, she said everyone around her kept telling her to endure it, but she couldn't understand how people could live that way. Outside, Mr. Nam-chun overheard everything and felt deeply pained. Back in her room, Mrs. Ki-dong thought about how her daughter had been mistreated by her husband's family, and suddenly realized she had treated Sarin the exact same way. She began questioning herself, wondering if she had become a terrible mother-in-law. Although she tried to convince herself that she was a good person, she finally decided to send a message to Sarin. At that moment, Sarin was sitting in a cafe. She received a text from Mrs. Ki-dong, an apology for making her work so hard during her first holiday with the family, saying she had asked her to come for dinner because she was worried she might be tired, and telling her to get some proper rest. As for Gu-young, when he returned home, he didn't see his wife anywhere, only the TV playing their wedding video. Seeing Sarin's radiant smile back then, combined with the shock of what had happened to Mi-young, he was overwhelmed with guilt for not understanding his wife better. He immediately went to the cafe to find her. By then, Sarin was completely disheartened and let out all the frustration she had been bottling up. She asked why she had to serve Chul-soo, and why Mrs. Ki-dong had told her she should have visited her mother a week earlier, even though she was an only child. Gu-young was stunned. He never realized how much she had endured and could only mutter an apology. Yet he still didn't fully grasp the situation. He turned to blame Sarin, asking why she hadn't said any of this at the time. Sarin shot back, asking how she could possibly have spoken up in that situation. Gu-young insisted why not. In the end, he sighed in frustration, saying that nothing between them had changed, then asked what exactly she wanted him to do. He couldn't change his mother. His words left Sarin completely silent. She quietly remarked that things had been so much better when they were in love, because back then all they cared about was each other. The argument ended without resolution. As she stepped out of the cafe, Sarin felt regret for ever getting married. She wished she could just be alone. The next morning, Sarin decided to take a leave of absence. Without telling anyone, she went on a trip alone. She left a letter for Guyoung, saying that she needed some quiet time to think and hoped he would also reflect on their situation so they could have a proper conversation when she returned. Guyoung angrily threw the letter aside. He still believed that his wife doing housework and taking care of his parents was only natural, as he had grown up in a traditional family. He went everywhere looking for Sarin, but couldn't find her. When he arrived at her workplace, he overheard her colleagues talking about how unhappy she had been since getting married. One of them recognized Guyoung, approached him, and told him everything Sarin had been through. Returning home, Guyoung sat in a corner, drinking to ease his frustration. He recalled what Sarin's co-worker had said, that she had to work overtime, go on business trips, and still return to her in-laws' house during holidays to handle everything. He also remembered Sarin once saying she was exhausted after work, yet still had to clean up for others. Guyoung finally realized he had failed as a husband. He hadn't even cared for his wife as much as her colleagues did. The next morning, Mrs. Kidong called to ask why she couldn't reach Sarin. Guyoung quickly lied, saying that Sarin was asleep and would call back later. When he got up to get some water, he happened to see the agreement he and Sarin had once written together. He laughed bitterly, realizing he hadn't followed a single rule in it. Looking back at the messy living room, Guyoung finally accepted that Sarin had truly left, so he began cleaning up on his own. Her departure this time completely woke him up. He remembered her words and realized that everything he had taken for granted was never actually Sarin's obligation. Summoning his courage, Guyoung decided to set things right. He brought a cake to his parents' house and honestly told them that since Sarin had spent the Mid-Autumn Festival with his family, they would go to her mother, Mrs. Younghee's, house for the upcoming Lunar New Year. Mr. and Mrs. Kidong were both shocked. They immediately suspected that Sarin had put him up to it. Guyoung quickly explained, "This is my own decision, because holidays should be shared equally between husband and wife." Hearing that, Mrs. Kidong became visibly irritated. She complained that young people nowadays wanted everything to be perfectly equal. She snapped, asking if that meant salaries and houses should also be split in half. Guyoung countered that it was because Sarin had always been the one who gave in and endured everything. Enraged, Mrs. Kidong said she was tired of her children, especially since one of them was already talking about getting divorced. Curious, Guyoung asked who was planning to separate, but Mrs. Kidong didn't explain. She only said she wanted her children to live in harmony. Guyoung stood frozen, remembering how he once mocked his older brother for arguing with their parents over his wife, and now he himself was making his parents upset. Feeling dejected, he turned to leave and ran into Myung, who was standing by the door, crying uncontrollably. It turned out the person Mr. Namchun had mentioned was Myung. She told Guyoung that the previous day, she had handed her husband a signed separation agreement. When their parents found out, Mr. Namchun dismissed it as a typical marital argument and scolded Mrs. Kidong for not persuading her daughter otherwise. Hearing this, Mrs. Kidong grew furious and almost blurted out the truth about how badly her daughter had been treated. Myung told Guyoung that she felt like she had finally matured. She realized that their mother had spent her entire life living for others, as a mother, a wife, and a daughter-in-law, while forgetting to live for herself. Myung understood that before fulfilling all those roles, the most important thing was to live one's own life well, and that doing one's duty didn't necessarily bring happiness. After hearing his sister's words, Guyoung no longer believed that Sarin's housework and family care were things to be taken for granted. He decided to go find her. After asking around, he learned that Sarin had gone to the resort she had always wanted to visit. He immediately drove there to look for her. Meanwhile, Sarin was in Jeju. She stopped by a small shop she had once visited during a business trip and left a note for the owner. Then she walked alone along the beach, reflecting on why she had always forced herself to do things she didn't like. When she reached a fork in the road, she noticed 2 cups of coffee placed on a stone pillar and saw Guyoung about to leave. The two sat down to talk. Guyoung admitted that for the first time since their marriage, he had truly tried to see things from Sarin's perspective. He said he finally understood that the things he used to see as natural were never natural at all. Guyoung explained that he had once thought finding his runaway wife and bringing her home was simply a husband's natural responsibility. But seeing her alone here, he realized he had been wrong. He told her that, at this moment, she truly looked like herself, radiant and free. It turned out that when he was driving there, he had seen Sarin smiling brightly on the beach and realized that, at last, she was living as her true self. He understood that she didn't belong to anyone, yet all those imposed roles had confused her. and that was when he had first thought about letting go. Although Gu-young offered many heartfelt apologies, Sarin still decided not to return with him. After leaving, he sent her a message. In it, he wrote about the Sarin he loved, the one whose hair curled on rainy days, who ordered 2 caramel macchiatos when under pressure, and who was passionate about her work. He promised he would never again take those should-be roles for granted and that he would wait for her to come back. At that moment, the shop owner in Jeju called Sarin after finding her note. He told her a story about pine trees, that when they are unwell, they produce many cones to leave behind their seeds, as a way of expressing their discomfort. The story made Sarin reflect on herself. She realized that the fault didn't lie solely with her husband's family. Her own silence and constant efforts to please everyone had allowed them to keep pushing her boundaries further. Some time later, Sarin returned home, having straightened her hair. When she went back to work, she received an invitation to the Milan Furniture Fair, a dream she had cherished for a long time. But soon after, Mrs. Ki-dong called to inform her that since both Gu-young and Mr. Nam-chun would be busy, the family had decided to celebrate Mr. Nam-chun's birthday a week early, right during the time she was supposed to be in Milan. This time, Sarin didn't give in. She bravely explained to her mother-in-law that she wouldn't be able to attend because she was going to Milan. She told her that it was her lifelong dream, then quickly left before Mrs. Ki-dong could respond. That night, she booked her flight, but in the end, due to her own hesitation, Sarin still missed the opportunity. However, no one had stopped her. It had been her own choice. Later, she received a message showing a transfer of 1 million won from Mrs. Ki-dong. The gesture deeply touched Sarin's heart, reminding her that, above all else, family still meant more to her than work. Not long after, Mrs. Ki-dong's birthday party arrived. This year, Sarin couldn't make it home because of work. Mi-young asked who would be preparing the food, and Gu-young immediately said that he and Mi-young would do it together. Hearing that, Mrs. Ki-dong felt sorry for her son and waved it off, saying that men didn't need to be in the kitchen. Mi-young could handle it alone. Mr. Nam-chun spoke up, saying it wasn't such an important occasion that they should trouble the busy children. The next morning, before dawn, Mrs. Ki-dong had to get up early to cook seaweed soup for herself. When Gu-young woke up and saw this, he told his mother to rest while he and Mi-young would take care of everything. Since neither of them had ever cooked before, they ended up calling her every 5 minutes to ask where the soy sauce or frying pan was, keeping her from getting any rest at all. In the end, Mrs. Ki-dong had to do everything herself, grumbling nonstop. If only Sarin were here, things would be so much easier. At that very moment, Sarin received a message from her mother-in-law while at work. Mrs. Ki-dong told her to focus on her job, and that from now on, she didn't need to prepare birthday parties anymore. Sarin immediately sensed the subtle reproach behind those words. During the dinner party, Hyrin and her husband arrived late. Mrs. Ki-dong immediately asked why they didn't bring their daughter along, adding that children should be cared for personally by their mothers. An aunt from the family chimed in irritably, saying that sending kids to daycare would only make them sickly as they grew up. Hyrin quickly fired back, saying that Gu-in had also been raised by his mother-in-law, so why was he always complaining about aches and pains? The aunt, stung by the remark, turned her criticism towards Sarin. She asked whether Sarin had prepared the dinner party. When told she hadn't, the aunt immediately scolded her for being unfilial. Mr. Nam-chun tried to ease the tension, but Mrs. Ki-dong looked displeased and exchanged glances with the aunt. The aunt then started lecturing about all the hardships and sacrifices Mrs. Ki-dong had endured throughout her life. At that point, Gu-young spoke up, saying that if anyone was at fault, it was the 2 sons, not their wives. Mrs. Ki-dong reluctantly agreed with her son's words. Trying to brush everything off, Sarin, feeling uncomfortable, went to the restroom for a moment, and Hyrin followed her. Hyrin comforted her, telling her not to take the aunt's words to heart, and that every relationship needs a healthy amount of distance. Sarin realized that she had always been trying to please everyone, yet things had never turned out the way she hoped. One early morning, Mrs. Ki-dong called again, asking Sarin and Gu-young to come over for dinner that evening without explaining why. After dinner, Sarin was once again the one washing the dishes. During that time, Mrs. Ki-dong deliberately asked why Gu-young looked thinner lately, implying that Sarin wasn't taking good care of her husband. Gu-young quickly explained that he was on a diet. However, after that, Mrs. Ki-dong's attitude completely changed. She even set aside some fruit especially for Sarin. When Sarin took a bite of kiwi, Mrs. Ki-dong immediately stared at her and asked if it tasted sour. Sarin replied that the kiwi was actually very sweet today. Hearing that, Mrs. Kidong and Mr. Namchan exchanged bright smiles. They mentioned an old folk belief related to eating habits during pregnancy. It turned out that the night before, Mrs. Kidong had a dream in which Sarin picked up a golden seed. Mr. Namchan cheerfully asked if that meant they were about to have a grandchild. But when Sarin said she wasn't planning to have a baby yet, Mrs. Kidong's expression changed instantly. She began persuading her that it was best to have children while still young. Since Sarin was in an important stage of her career, the couple could only make vague promises to appease her. As they were leaving, Mrs. Kidong ran after them and handed Sarin a bag of expensive bread that had already expired. She insisted it was still fine to eat because she had kept it in the freezer, leaving Sarin awkwardly accepting it. In the car, Guyang went along with his parents' wishes and asked Sarin if they should have a child. Sarin immediately refused, reminding him about her career and the 20-year mortgage on their house. But at that moment, she suddenly realized her period was a week late. She tried to reassure herself that it was just due to overwork, that it couldn't possibly be that. Even though she didn't want to believe it, Sarin still didn't dare let Guyang notice anything unusual. Back at the office, she was so distracted that her co-workers had to remind her to go eat. In the cafeteria, the female colleagues were complaining about husbands who never helped with housework, lamenting that even after tiring work days they still had to do everything at home, including taking care of the children. One of them even joked, "I don't know what marriage has ever really given to women." At that moment, Sarin picked up a piece of fish and noticed it didn't taste fresh, but the others said it was fine and tasted good. Embarrassed, she explained that she might just be tired lately. On the way back to the office, she suddenly felt unwell and rushed into a pharmacy. Seeing pregnancy tests on the counter, she hesitated for a long time before deciding to buy one and check it at work. The result left her stunned. What she feared most had come true. Her mind went blank, and even the good news that her long-awaited project had just been approved by the company couldn't lift her spirits. This pregnancy would turn her entire life plan upside down. On the subway ride home, Sarin recalled the agreement she and Guyang had made, that they would wait 2 more years before having a child. After work, she stopped when she saw children playing in the park and suddenly noticed Guyang standing on the opposite side, smiling absent-mindedly as he watched them. The sight made her feelings even more complicated. That evening, Guyang took her to a restaurant. Before they could order, his superior called, urging him to prepare for a work handover. Sarin asked what was going on. Guyang explained that a female colleague had to leave her job because of pregnancy, so he would be taking over her work. Hearing this, Sarin, who had just managed to calm herself, became confused again. Still doubting the result, she went to a pharmacy the next morning and bought several more pregnancy tests, but all of them showed the same result. When Guyang came home and saw the pile of test sticks, he was stunned. Sarin told him that she seemed to be pregnant, but she truly wasn't ready to have a child. At the same time, Hiren's family also faced trouble when, due to the daycare's negligence, their daughter was injured on the head. The couple had to find a new caregiver, but that would take a few days while both of them still had to work. After discussing it, they decided to visit Mrs. Kidong's house. Upon hearing that her granddaughter was hurt, Mrs. Kidong immediately complained, saying she had warned them not to leave the child with strangers. She insisted that they bring the girl over so she could take care of her. However, Hiren decided instead to send her daughter to her own mother's house, saying that would make her feel more at ease. Hearing that, Mrs. Kidong was displeased, lamenting that while other mothers-in-law wished to take care of their grandchildren, she was being denied the chance. However, Guin forgot to pick up his daughter because he was busy at a company party, leaving the child to stay another night at her grandmother's house. This incident sparked an argument between the couple. Hiren blamed Guin for drinking even though he knew he was responsible for picking up their child. Guin explained that his superior was present, so he couldn't refuse. Hiren rejected that excuse, emphasizing that it was a matter of principle. She pointed out that she, too, faced pressure at work but had never once failed to care for their child. She reminded her husband that they had clearly agreed parenting was a shared responsibility. Once that principle was broken, the burden would fall entirely on one person. Guin thought she was overreacting, but Hiren demanded that it must never happen again. Just then, Hiren's mother called to say she had strained her back while bathing her granddaughter. Hyrin hurriedly drove over, while Guin blamed himself for drinking and being unable to drive, indirectly causing trouble for his mother-in-law. Now, Hyrin and Guin truly had no one left to look after their child. Even so, Hyrin still didn't want to ask Mrs. Kidong for help. She decided to take a 1-month leave from work. Guin didn't want his wife to quit her job, so the next day, he tried staying home to take care of their child himself. But after only half a day, he gave up and took the baby to his parents' house for help. As soon as Mrs. Kidong heard that Hyrin's mother was injured, she immediately scolded him, asking why it was Guin taking leave instead of Hyrin. She stressed that men should focus on their careers, while women naturally ought to stay home and care for the children. Seeing his mother go on, Guin changed the subject, saying he'd been so busy with the baby that he hadn't even eaten. The next day, Guyoung came to visit and accidentally woke his niece, so Guin made him soothe the baby. That was the first time Guyoung truly experienced how exhausting childcare could be. Guin complained that children could cry at any moment and parents had to comfort them right away. Even knowing how hard it was, Guyoung still felt happy about becoming a father soon. He shared his good news with Guin, who congratulated him and advised him to treat Sarin well. In the end, Hyrin and Guin had no choice but to bring their child to Mrs. Kidong's house. Hyrin said that raising their child was their responsibility and she didn't want to trouble her in-laws. Guin replied, "If not, then what should we do? Bring the baby to the office or leave her home alone?" As soon as they arrived, Mrs. Kidong complained that they should have brought the child to her much earlier. Hyrin explained that they would soon find someone new and would pay her for the childcare. Mrs. Kidong immediately said that such words made her sad, insisting that taking care of her grandchild was only natural and that family members shouldn't be so calculative. On the way home, Hyrin felt deeply sad. She realized that everything else in life could be achieved through effort, except when it came to children, which left her feeling helpless. Meanwhile, Myung also fell into despair. The lawyer told her that it would be very difficult to file for a unilateral divorce without concrete evidence of Chul-soo's abuse or infidelity. That night, when Myung came home late, her father, Mr. Nam-chun, scolded her. He asked if she had been as selfish and careless at her husband's house. He said that marriage required patience and mutual adjustment. Myung burst into tears, saying she had tried her best but simply couldn't go on. Mr. Nam-chun believed she was still attached to her husband, and that was why she was complaining. Through sobs, Myung explained that the problem was Chul-soo's refusal. She couldn't get divorced because he wouldn't agree. Hearing that, Mr. Nam-chun grew furious and shouted at her to leave the house. Mrs. Kidong quickly tried to stop him, asking where he expected their daughter to go. As for Myung, Chul-soo suddenly showed up at her house late at night, bringing her favorite Korean beef. Seeing his son-in-law, Mr. Nam-chun told his wife to prepare dinner, but Myung pulled Chul-soo outside to talk in the park. She asked why he had always refused to visit her parents before, but was now suddenly bringing gifts. Chul-soo apologized, saying he wanted to make up for his mistakes, but Myung refused to accept it. She only asked him to sign the agreement papers. He begged for another chance, but Myung said she had already given him more than enough. The memories of his mistreatment were carved too deeply in her mind. She asked where he had been when she was in pain and firmly told him she had made up her mind to stop looking for her. As for Sarin, Guyoung took her to the hospital for a full checkup, where the doctor confirmed she was 5 weeks pregnant. Guyoung was so happy that he jumped for joy. He wanted to hug Sarin but was afraid it might affect the baby, so he could only offer his congratulations. In contrast, Sarin couldn't feel any happiness. She stared blankly at the ultrasound image, her mind filled with tangled thoughts. On the subway to work, she saw the priority seat reserved for pregnant women but didn't dare to sit down, as she still couldn't accept this reality. An older woman got on, sat in the seat, and asked if Sarin was pregnant, but Sarin denied it. At work, she was supposed to visit a client with a colleague, but that colleague suddenly got a call from her child's school saying the child had stomach pain and needed to go to the hospital immediately. She asked Sarin to meet the client alone. That evening, the client suggested they have some drinks. Because she was pregnant, Sarin had to lie that she had gastritis to refuse, which immediately dampened the client's mood. Fortunately, her female colleague arrived just in time to ease the awkward atmosphere. Later, the colleague apologized to Sarin and blamed herself for not being a good mother. She lamented that people often criticized working mothers for not separating personal and professional life, and she never thought she'd become one of them. She felt like she tried to be a superwoman, but ended up doing everything poorly. Sarin comforted her, saying she had done well, But the woman confessed that at work she had to watch others' moods, and at home she still wasn't a good mother. Hearing this, Sarin fell deep into thought, realizing that she might end up the same way in the not-so-distant future. While Sarin was overwhelmed with confusion, Guyoung couldn't hide his joy. He excitedly told all his co-workers the news and even announced that he would cover the entire dinner bill that night. The next day, Sarin planned to meet her friends, but one of them, Jansu, couldn't go because she had no one to look after her child. So everyone decided to gather at Jansu's house instead. As soon as they met, Jansu started complaining about her husband. She said she had told him about her plans a week in advance. Yet as soon as he came home, he lay down and refused to take care of the child for even a minute, then went fishing with his co-workers. She added that even when she wanted to go out on weekends, she had to gauge his mood first. He always kept emphasizing that he was the one working hard to earn money. Their other friend, Jumi, expressed her frustration, saying that at least a job had an end to the workday, but childcare never stopped. Jansu agreed, saying that the child belonged to both of them. Yet somehow she was always the one left exhausted and disheveled. She confessed that if it weren't for her child, she would have wanted to divorce a long time ago. Early the next morning, Mrs. Kidong called and asked Sarin and her husband to attend the funeral of a relative. Guyoung told Sarin that such places weren't good for pregnant women and suggested she stay home. However, Sarin was worried her mother-in-law would complain. She told Guyoung not to mention her pregnancy since a funeral wasn't the right place to announce it, and to just say she was busy with work. At the funeral, when Mrs. Kidong saw Guyoung arrive alone, she immediately asked where Sarin was. Guyoung had no choice but to lie that she was busy with urgent business. Mrs. Kidong's expression darkened right away. To make things worse, a strict uncle frowned upon hearing that Sarin didn't come. He said it was disrespectful for her not to attend a family event on her husband's side. Seeing this, Mrs. Kidong tried to defend her daughter-in-law, saying that Sarin had never even met that aunt before. But the uncle dismissed her words, claiming that such leniency was exactly why the younger generation had no sense of manners. He added that while Hiren's absence could be excused because she had a small child, it was unfair that Mrs. Kidong had to handle everything alone. Watching his mother struggle, Guyoung couldn't hold it in any longer and finally admitted that Sarin was pregnant. Once she learned the reason, Mrs. Kidong immediately called Sarin. As soon as Sarin answered, she began by apologizing, but Mrs. Kidong cheerfully asked if it was true that she was pregnant. When Sarin confirmed, Mrs. Kidong told her to stay home and rest, assuring her there was nothing important to worry about. After hanging up, Sarin felt completely flustered. She hadn't expected her mother-in-law to find out so quickly. Meanwhile, because she hadn't eaten enough at the funeral, Myung went to the kitchen late at night to look for food, but unfortunately, she was caught by Mr. Namchan. He immediately began scolding her, lamenting that if only all three of his children could live well, how wonderful that would be. He reproached Myung, saying that all she needed to do was endure a little longer and have a child with Chol-soo, but instead she thought she was too smart and insisted on getting a divorce. His words deeply hurt Myung. She held back her tears and quietly walked away. When Mr. Namchun asked why she wasn't eating, Myung replied that she was full. Still irritated, Mr. Namchun turned to Mrs. Kidong and complained that he didn't understand what their daughter lacked to make her want a divorce. That day, when Hiren came home from work, she saw Mrs. Kidong preparing breakfast for the next morning. Hiren told her it wasn't necessary, since she and her husband rarely ate breakfast. Hearing that, Mrs. Kidong began to complain. She said that when Guin was little, he couldn't start the day without a bowl of rice, and if Hiren didn't cook for him, his health would suffer. It turned out she said all that out of concern for her son. Seeing her mother-in-law's firm attitude, Hiren reluctantly agreed. But Mrs. Kidong continued, saying that their granddaughter seemed very lonely when she was alone, and when she took her outside to play, the child would just stare at other kids. Hearing that, Hiren said the child indeed needed to start socializing, so she and her husband had decided to send her to daycare. Mrs. Kidong dismissed that idea. That wasn't what she meant. She wanted them to have another baby while they were still young so their daughter would have a sibling to play with. Smiling politely, Hiren replied that even one child already caused her mother-in-law trouble, and financially it was hard for them to raise two. Mrs. Kidong immediately said she would help raise them, insisting that one or two made no difference to her. Hearing that, Hiren stayed silent, then angrily picked up her child and prepared to leave. As they headed out, Mrs. Kidong still put a hat on her granddaughter and reminded Hiren not to let the child catch a cold since it was chilly at night. Once outside, Hyrin stood there looking unhappy and sighed as she recalled her mother-in-law's words. As for Sarin, Mrs. Kidong specially prepared a grand dinner to celebrate her pregnancy. When everyone was about to eat, the others were served plain white rice, but Sarin received a bowl mixed with soybeans. As she was about to pick them out, Mrs. Kidong noticed and quickly said that soybeans were highly nutritious and good for pregnant women. Sarin didn't like soybeans, but Mrs. Kidong insisted that once pregnant, she couldn't just eat whatever she wanted. Even if she disliked something, she had to eat it for the baby's sake. Reluctantly, Sarin forced herself to swallow. At that moment, Mr. Namchun chimed in, saying that since Guin already had a daughter, it would be great if Gu Young and Sarin could have a son. Mrs. Kidong immediately added, "What's wrong with having a girl? After having a daughter, just have another one. It's best to have children year after year." She once again mentioned how lonely her granddaughter looked playing alone and said that was absolutely not acceptable. At least 2 children were necessary. Wanting to please his parents, Gu Young carelessly replied that in that case, they should hurry up and have another one soon. Sarin quickly asked, "Then what about my job?" Gu Young casually said she could return to work slowly after giving birth. Sarin explained that even regular maternity leave required caution, and if she took too long, the company might not let her return. Mrs. Kidong countered that it was even better that way, saying Sarin didn't earn much anyway, and that it would be wiser to live off Gu Young's salary, stay home as a housewife, and focus on raising the children. Fortunately, Mr. Namchun stepped in to change the subject, or else the dinner truly couldn't have continued. When they got home, Sarin noticed 2 bottles of some dark-colored liquid on the table. Gu Young quickly poured her a glass and said it was fish broth that his mother had specially prepared for her, reminding her to drink 1 cup every day for the baby's health. Sarin didn't want to drink it, but Gu Young kept insisting, saying she had to drink it for the child's sake. Reluctantly, Sarin took a sip, but the taste immediately made her feel nauseous. Unable to bear it, she angrily stormed out, saying she needed to take a walk. That evening, Gu Young had dinner at his parents' house and ate heartily. Seeing that her son seemed thinner lately, Mrs. Kidong told him to pack some grilled meat to take home. Gu Young explained that Sarin had severe morning sickness and couldn't stand the smell of grilled meat. Mrs. Kidong complained that Sarin was being too particular. She immediately called Sarin, who was still working overtime at the office. She asked how Sarin was doing, saying she had heard about her nausea and reminding her not to neglect eating. But as soon as food was mentioned, Mrs. Kidong shifted the topic to her son. She told Sarin to make sure Gu Young ate on time, saying that at home, he probably didn't eat well because he was watching her mood, and now he'd gotten thinner, which made her very worried. She added that she knew Sarin worked hard, but as a mother, she only felt sorry for her son. One day, when Sarin became a mother herself, she would understand a mother's heart. At that moment, Sarin realized the call wasn't meant to show concern for her at all. It was to criticize her. All she could do was quietly apologize. Early the next morning, before dawn, Sarin was awakened by her alarm. Gu Young offered to drive her to work, but Sarin said she could take the subway herself. However, the smell of other passengers' food on the train immediately triggered her morning sickness, forcing her to get off midway. Because of that, she was late for an important meeting. Later, on the way back, a senior executive completely ignored her presence. He reclined his seat all the way back even though he knew Sarin, who was pregnant, was sitting behind him, which made her extremely uncomfortable. He even suggested that she hand over her current project to another colleague. Fortunately, the team leader beside them spoke up for Sarin, and the executive reluctantly gave her another chance. That evening, Sarin apologized to her team leader for having caused extra pressure. The team leader comforted her, saying she understood well. She had been through the same kind of situation before. As for Mi-young, to avoid her father's constant complaints, she decided to move out and rent a place of her own. Worried that the landlord might ask too many questions, she asked Gu Young to pretend to be her husband during the viewing. That day, Sarin had been busy all day, and when she got home, Gu Young eagerly took out the prenatal education book that Mi-young had given them, saying he wanted to read it aloud to the baby. But Sarin was too exhausted to feel any interest. Ignoring that, Gu Young insisted she listen, which irritated her. She asked, "Can't you see I'm tired?" Only then did Gu Young realize and hurriedly apologize. Sarin felt both helpless and hurt, turning away to head into the bedroom. At that moment, Gu Young's mind was entirely focused on the baby, seemingly oblivious to his wife's emotional state. In the middle of the night, Sarin felt nauseous and got up to go to the bathroom. When she returned to bed, she looked at her husband sleeping beside her. Thinking about everything that had happened that day, she realized that everyone seemed to care only about what they wanted. Mrs. Kidong cared about her son, Gu-young cared about the baby in her belly, and her boss cared only about work. She wondered if anyone truly cared about how she felt. With that thought, Sarin could no longer hold back. She started to cry, though quietly, afraid of waking her husband. That evening, Hyrin went to her mother-in-law's house to pick up her daughter. As soon as she greeted her, she noticed Mrs. Kidong feeding the child kiwi. Shocked, Hyrin asked, "Mother, are you giving her kiwi?" Mrs. Kidong casually replied that the child liked it. Hyrin reminded her that she had clearly written a list of foods the child wasn't allowed to eat, and kiwi was on that list. So why was she feeding it to her? Mrs. Kidong immediately argued back, saying that children who are overprotected tend to get sick easily, and that being less picky makes them healthier. Hyrin tried to explain that each age group had its own suitable foods, but Mrs. Kidong stubbornly insisted on her own experience, saying that at this age, children could eat anything. She even added, "Do you think I'd harm my own granddaughter?" Realizing she couldn't reason with her mother-in-law, Hyrin fell silent. As she was about to leave, Mrs. Kidong told her not to bathe the child that evening because she and a cousin had already taken the girl to the public bathhouse. Hyrin was stunned. She said the child was far too young to go there, that the floors were slippery and dangerous, and the place was hardly sanitary. But Mrs. Kidong insisted her way was fine. Hyrin didn't argue anymore. She simply stayed quiet and left with her daughter. As Hyrin stepped out, she ran into Mi-young. After greeting her sister-in-law, Mi-young went straight into her room without saying a word to her mother. Watching her daughter walk away, Mrs. Kidong felt her heart ache. Earlier that day, she had heard from a cousin that Mi-young had moved out to rent a place because she didn't want to be disliked by her father, Mr. Nam-chan. Overcome with guilt, Mrs. Kidong went into Mi-young's room and handed her a sum of money she had been saving for many years, telling her to use it to find a better place to live. Blaming herself, she said it was all her fault, from not letting her daughter pursue graduate school to forcing her into a marriage she knew wasn't right. Mi-young hugged her mother tightly and said it wasn't her fault, that it was her own life and her own decision. When Hyrin got home, she saw her daughter fast asleep and sighed, thinking the little girl must have been very tired today. In a moment of despair, Hyrin took out the resignation letter she had already prepared. She decided to give up her career and stay home to focus entirely on caring for her daughter. That day, Mrs. Kidong called Sarin to remind her about the upcoming memorial ceremony that weekend. Speaking politely, she said that if Sarin wasn't feeling well, she didn't need to force herself to come. After hesitating for a moment, Sarin eventually said she would attend. Mrs. Kidong immediately sounded pleased, saying, "That's the right attitude. Being pregnant doesn't mean you can't go anywhere. Moving around more is good for the baby." Sarin sighed and hung up. Knowing his mother had just called his wife, Gu-young was about to call back and tell her that only he would go that weekend, since Sarin was too tired from the pregnancy. But Mrs. Kidong said Sarin had already agreed to come and even mentioned that staying home made her feel more tired. Hearing that his wife had volunteered to go, Gu-young felt pleased, thinking that this was how a good daughter-in-law should be. The day of the memorial finally arrived. Sarin sat on the floor helping Mrs. Kidong prepare the food. When Mrs. Kidong asked her to go out to the balcony to get a bottle of cooking oil, Gu-young immediately stood up and offered to fetch it instead. Mrs. Kidong's face darkened in disapproval. Gu-young asked why Mi-young wasn't around. Mrs. Kidong said she had sent Mi-young out because she didn't want her daughter to be at home and have to endure Mr. Nam-chan's mood. Then she continued assigning Sarin more tasks. Seeing this, Gu-young rolled up his sleeves to help, but Mrs. Kidong quickly shooed him away, telling him not to get in the way. The strict uncle spoke up, asking if Gu-young was afraid his mother was making his wife work too much. He added that men hanging around in the kitchen only made things inconvenient and told Gu-young to go have a drink instead. Feeling awkward, Sarin told her husband to go. Seeing her son's lingering guilt, Mrs. Kidong became irritated and told Sarin to rest in the room, saying she would finish everything herself. Gu-young gently pushed his wife toward the room, telling her to rest and leave the rest to him. But barely a minute after Sarin lay down, she heard Mrs. Kidong outside scolding Gu-young for being clumsy and useless. Hearing that, Sarin felt deeply uncomfortable. That night at home, Gu-young told Sarin to turn off her computer and rest, saying she could finish her work tomorrow or ask someone else for help. Frustrated, Sarin said that she was already forced to watch others' moods because of her pregnancy, and now he wanted her to hand off her project. But who was she supposed to ask for help? She told him that his life hadn't changed at all, so he couldn't possibly understand how she felt. Gu-young sighed and said, "Of course I understand, but about the memorial, you could have just said you were busy. No one forced you to go." Sarin snapped, saying, "You're right, it's my fault. No one made me do anything, but I pushed myself like an idiot anyway." The two ended up arguing again over the memorial. That night, in the middle of the night, Sarin suddenly felt a sharp pain in her stomach. She called out to Gu-young, saying she was in pain and didn't know what to do. Though she said her stomach hurt, Gu-young thought she was just being dramatic. Still, he took her to the hospital. After examining her, the doctor told him that Sarin was experiencing a threatened miscarriage caused by overwork and stress. Although the baby was fine, she would need to be extremely careful from now on. Remembering their argument the night before, Gu-young still believed he hadn't said anything wrong. He thought Sarin was simply being too sensitive. When Mrs. Young-hee heard that her daughter had been hospitalized, she rushed there immediately. She didn't blame Gu-young at all and went straight into the room to see her daughter. Seeing Sarin lying in a hospital bed broke her heart. Sarin was surprised to see her mother, and Gu-young explained that he had called her. Mrs. Young-hee told her daughter to rest easy, assuring her that she would take care of everything. She told Gu-young that from now on, he needed to take better care of Sarin. But Gu-young replied that he had been busy with work lately and couldn't easily take time off. Hearing that, Mrs. Young-hee went back that very night, temporarily closed her shop, and decided to move into Sarin's home for a while to look after her daughter. Not long after being discharged from the hospital, Sarin received a call from Mrs. Ki-dong. Instead of asking how she was, Mrs. Ki-dong immediately scolded her for still being at home at that hour. Sarin had no choice but to lie, saying she wasn't feeling well and had taken the day off. Mrs. Ki-dong said she had a bad dream the night before, which was why she called, and then quickly asked if the baby was all right. Sarin reassured her that everything was fine and told her not to worry. Mrs. Ki-dong told her to rest and hung up. The moment she did, she turned to Mr. Nam-chun and complained, "I don't understand why Sarin keeps getting sick all the time." Mr. Nam-chun replied that it was probably because of her stressful work. Mrs. Ki-dong immediately objected, saying that when she was pregnant with her 3 children, she still managed to run a business and take care of her in-laws without any problem. Mr. Nam-chun said times had changed and urged her to be more considerate towards Sarin since she was pregnant. Mrs. Ki-dong reluctantly agreed. At Sarin's house, Mrs. Young-hee was busy without pause, even preparing Sarin's favorite braised ribs. Just then, Mrs. Ki-dong arrived for a visit. Seeing Mrs. Young-hee there, she looked surprised. Gu-young explained that since Sarin needed rest, his mother-in-law had come to take care of her. Mrs. Ki-dong immediately asked if it was serious and whether there was anything wrong with the baby. Sarin quickly replied, "I'm just a bit tired." Mrs. Ki-dong then began her usual lecture, saying she had told Sarin long ago to quit her job. How could someone so weak handle working like that? She then turned to Mrs. Young-hee and asked, "Aren't you running your business? How come you're staying here all the time?" Mrs. Young-hee said her daughter wasn't feeling well, so taking a few days off wouldn't matter. Mrs. Ki-dong responded politely but pointedly, saying that Mrs. Young-hee should have informed her, so she could have come over too. Mrs. Young-hee replied that she hadn't wanted to trouble her. Mrs. Ki-dong insisted that Sarin was her daughter as well and that it was only natural for her to take care of her. Then she told Gu-young to reheat the porridge she had brought. When Mrs. Young-hee offered to do it instead, telling Gu-young to rest, Mrs. Ki-dong just sat on the sofa, giving non-stop instructions from her seat. Watching her mother quietly working in the kitchen, Sarin felt a deep ache in her heart but didn't dare say a word. As she left, Mrs. Ki-dong told Gu-young to make sure Sarin quit her job and stay home, saying he could keep working since his mother-in-law was there to help. Otherwise, she added, who's going to earn money to buy milk for the baby? After Mrs. Ki-dong left, Mrs. Young-hee began cleaning the house again. Sarin told her mother to leave it and let her do it instead, but Mrs. Young-hee waved her off, telling her to go rest. Watching her mother's busy back, Sarin suddenly realized one thing. A mother-in-law would always be a mother-in-law, but one's own mother would forever be a true mother. Mrs. Ki-dong urged Hyrin to come pick up her daughter early, but Hyrin received an urgent message from work saying she couldn't leave. She called Gu-in and asked him to go instead. Gu-in said he was about to have a meeting, but in the end, he told her not to worry and that he'd pick up their daughter. He even repeated her own words, that raising a child was the shared responsibility of both parents. When Gu-in arrived home, Mrs. Ki-dong immediately asked why Hyrin hadn't come. He explained that his wife had an urgent matter at work. Mrs. Ki-dong complained right away, saying, "What could be more important than your child?" Gu-in quickly tried to smooth things over, explaining that it was unavoidable, not because Hyrin valued work more than family. Just then, Mr. Nam-chun came back with their granddaughter. Guin was about to pick her up when he noticed a lollipop in her hand and asked his father what it was. Mr. Namchun explained that on their way home, the supermarket owner had found the little girl so adorable that he gave her a lollipop. Guin immediately objected, saying his daughter was too young to eat that kind of candy and that it would ruin her teeth. Hearing this, Mrs. Kidong snatched the lollipop away, saying irritably that it didn't matter since the girl would lose her baby teeth anyway, then handed the candy back to her granddaughter. Mr. Namchun cheerfully added that the supermarket owner had said Guin's daughter would probably have a little brother in the future because she didn't like dolls and preferred boys' toys. Mrs. Kidong agreed, saying her granddaughter's gestures really did resemble a boy's. Hearing his parents say that, Guin became very upset and insisted that his daughter was already a perfect 200-point child. Mrs. Kidong replied that she only meant well and reminded him that she had told Hairin before, while they were still young, they should have another child and she would help raise it. At that moment, Guin finally understood why Hairin didn't want his mother taking care of their daughter. Being constantly criticized like that was unbearable for anyone, and their parenting views were simply too different. When Guin got home, he sat on the sofa, lost in thought. A while later, Hairin returned from work. She quickly said, "You've worked hard, honey." Guin told her their daughter was already asleep. As Hairin was about to go check on her, he stopped her and apologized. He admitted he had been wrong to blame her before and said it was time for them to make a final decision. It turned out Guin also didn't want his mother to continue looking after their child. They decided to look for a daycare. However, when they arrived, the principal informed them that there were no openings. Other parents had reserved spots as soon as their babies were born, so they would have to wait at least another year. The couple realized that raising a child was even harder than bringing one into the world. It seemed they were left with only one option. Back home, Hairin took out the resignation letter she had already written. She told Guin that she had been thinking about it for a long time, but it kept hesitating, and now it was time to decide. Guin sighed and asked if she was truly happy with her job. Smiling, Hairin said of course she was. Becoming a journalist had always been her dream. After a long silence, Guin told her to keep doing what she loved and said he would stay home to take care of their daughter. He explained that their annual salaries were about the same, so it made sense for the one who was more passionate and better suited to continue working. He said that Hairin loved her job, while his dream was to become a good father. Surprised, Hairin asked if he really meant it. Guin confirmed that raising a child was their shared responsibility and that as long as they agreed together, that was all that mattered. Early the next morning, Guin and Hairin brought their daughter to his parents' house to share their decision. Mrs. Kidong was delighted to see them, thinking they had come to drop off the child. But when she heard Guin say that he was quitting his job to stay home and take care of their daughter full-time, both her and Mr. Namchun's expressions darkened immediately. Guin explained that it was a decision they had carefully discussed and that having one parent stay home to care for the child would be better. Mr. Namchun angrily asked, "Then what's your wife for? Why should you be the one to quit?" He insisted that men should be the breadwinners while women stayed home to raise children. Guin tried to explain that Hairin earned more money than he did, but that only made Mr. Namchun angrier. He said he had worked hard all his life to raise his son, put him through school, and help him get a good job. How could he throw all of that away just to take care of a child? He scolded his son for making decisions on his own and stormed off into his room. After he left, Mrs. Kidong turned to Hairin and asked if she had done something to upset her or if there had been any mistakes in how she'd cared for the child. She said that even if she had made some mistakes, it wasn't serious enough for Guin to quit his job. Hairin smiled and explained that wasn't the reason. She said that while earning money was important at this stage in their lives, they believed that personally raising their daughter was far more meaningful and a responsibility they wanted to fulfill. Mrs. Kidong said she couldn't understand their way of thinking. Guin then reminded his mother of what his father once said when he was drunk, that he regretted spending his whole life working and missing his children's growth. Guin said this decision was for their child and for the long-term happiness of their small family. He asked his mother to trust and understand their choice. That day, Mrs. Kidong went out to meet her friends. She proudly boasted about how she had been taking care of her grandchild and even said that if her children had a second baby, she would help raise that one too. Her friends praised her, but also advised her not to spoil her daughter-in-law too much, that she should make sure they treated her well in return. Mrs. Kidong immediately began to complain, saying that her daughter-in-law treated her own parents very well, but not her the same way. One of her friends chimed in, saying that modern daughters-in-law who didn't show proper respect to their mothers-in-law were unacceptable. The others added that no matter how much effort you put into caring for the grandchildren, they wouldn't really appreciate it. What they really wanted was financial help to buy good things or send their kids to prestigious schools. They concluded that to be considered a good mother-in-law these days, you had to have money. Hearing those words, Mrs. Ki-dong's expression darkened. On her way home, she passed a restaurant with a help wanted sign. She suddenly thought that maybe she should get a job too, to earn some money and help her children. But deep down, it was because she feared that in old age, no one would care about her. Meanwhile, Mi-young received an earnest message from Chul-soo and decided to meet him one last time. Chul-soo showed her the separation agreement and told her that he had just been hired by a company in Seidel. He asked Mi-young to forget everything that had happened in the past and to leave with him so they could start over, promising that he would make her happy. Surprised, Mi-young asked why he had brought the separation papers with him. Chul-soo replied that if she refused to go with him, he would sign them immediately to set her free. That night, Mi-young told Mrs. Ki-dong about her meeting with Chul-soo. Mrs. Ki-dong asked what her daughter planned to do. Mi-young said that after the breakup, she had planned to take the graduate school entrance exam and start a new life. She admitted feeling very guilty toward her parents, but also worried about how she would live alone after the divorce. Mrs. Ki-dong advised her not to care about what others thought and to follow her heart, to choose the path that would make her happiest. She mentioned Gu-in, saying that he had found happiness in his decision to stay home and care for his child. Reflecting on it, Mrs. Ki-dong realized that she had probably cared too much about how others saw her and had forgotten what truly mattered: her children's happiness. She assured Mi-young that no matter what decision she made, she would support her unconditionally. As for Sarin, she went out to eat with her close friends and learned that one of them, who had long struggled to conceive, was now pregnant. That friend happily shared that her husband was so excited he had already reserved a spot at a luxury postpartum care center. Sarin was surprised, realizing she hadn't even looked into such things yet. The friend mentioned that the cost was around 20 million won for 2 weeks, and that it was very hard to book a spot. Luckily, her in-laws were covering the expenses. The next morning, Gu-young took Sarin to look for a center. But when they arrived, they were told all the standard rooms were fully booked and only VIP rooms remained, costing 25 million won for 2 weeks. Embarrassed, the couple decided to think it over. They searched several other places, but none worked out. Some were too far away, others were far too expensive. Gu-young then suggested they ask his mother, saying Mrs. Ki-dong would surely take better care of her than any outsider. Sarin immediately refused, saying it would be extremely uncomfortable to have her mother-in-law caring for her during recovery. Gu-young, thinking it was no big deal, said it would be just like when Mrs. Young-hee looked after Sarin before. There was no difference. After that, the couple went shopping for baby supplies. Sarin spotted a stroller that her friend was also using and said it was a really good one. But when they saw the price tag, 2.8 million won, both of them were stunned. Gu-young was surprised, unable to understand why baby products were so expensive. Sarin said they would only be used for a short time, so there was no need to buy overly expensive ones. Yet she still seemed to want the best for her child. As they were about to leave, Gu-in called to invite the couple to have dinner at his house that evening. During the meal, Gu-in and Hai-rin explained that they wanted to celebrate Sarin's pregnancy, but since they had been busy with their baby, they only managed to arrange it now. Gu-young took the chance to ask about his older brother and said that Gu-in's decision to quit his job made him a bit worried about his brother's future. Gu-in comforted him, telling him not to overthink and to make decisions based on his own situation. Hai-rin added that the path they chose might not be the best, but it was the one that suited them most. She hoped Sarin and Gu-young wouldn't put too much pressure on themselves. Hai-rin then asked Sarin where she had been today. Sarin shared about visiting postpartum care centers. Nothing seemed ideal, which gave her quite a headache. Hearing this, Gu-young said he was thinking of asking Mrs. Ki-dong to take care of Sarin during her confinement. The moment he said that, Gu-in and Hai-rin exchanged looks and burst into laughter. Gu-in explained that he had once had the exact same idea, and Hai-rin had given him an example. She said, asking your mother-in-law to take care of her daughter-in-law after childbirth, if compared to a man, would be like having a sensitive surgery down there, and then asking your father-in-law to nurse you afterward. The story made all three laugh, except Gu-young, who couldn't bring himself to smile. Time passed, and one day Sarin woke up to find her belly had grown so big that she could no longer bend down to put on her socks. She sat helplessly and cried. Seeing his wife like that, Gu-young felt both sorry and amused, so he hurried over to help her. Sarin met up with her friend to learn from her experience. The friend told her that when she gave birth, the pain lasted for 32 hours straight, and in the end, she still had to undergo medical intervention. She advised Sarin that if she had known how painful it would be, she would have chosen a cesarean section from the start. After that, Sarin returned to the company. She noticed her colleagues looking at her with strange expressions. At that moment, her superior called her over and informed her that the project she had planned earlier had achieved great success at the Seoul Trade Fair. Everyone happily congratulated her, and her boss even gave her a generous bonus envelope. That evening, the whole team went out to celebrate. Watching everyone enjoy their drinks, Sarin felt tempted. She told herself that once her baby was born, she would definitely have a good drink. But the team leader quickly reminded her that if she planned to breastfeed, she would have to abstain for at least another year. Another colleague chimed in, saying she'd heard that pregnancy was actually the most relaxing period for women. The team leader immediately disagreed, saying that pregnant women hated hearing that because they had to endure back pain, sleepless nights, and all sorts of hardship. She said that being a mother meant there was never a day of rest, then listed all the challenges, from the newborn stage to when the child learned to walk, talk, and go to school. Hearing this, Sarin closed her eyes in fear and said that her baby wasn't even born yet, but she was already scared. The group concluded that in marriage, pregnancy, and childbirth, it was always women who suffered the most. The team leader added, "Just wait until the baby is born. That's when the third stage of in-law trials truly begins." In contrast to Sarin, after quitting his job, Guin devoted all his time to his daughter. He personally took care of her in every little detail, watching over her while also going to the market, cooking, and preparing dinner for Hye-rin when she came home from work. As for Mi-young, after the divorce procedure was finalized, she officially moved into her rented apartment. Worried that her daughter might not be eating well, Mrs. Ki-dong personally brought kimchi and homemade food to her. She advised her daughter not to focus only on studying. If she met a good person, she should try getting to know him. Mr. Nam-chun overheard and interrupted, telling them to start eating. That day marked the first time Mi-young cooked a meal herself for her parents. She made tomato stir-fried noodles. Mrs. Ki-dong was deeply touched, saying her daughter had finally grown up. Mr. Nam-chun then asked, "Aside from this, there's no rice." Just then, Mi-young received a text message notifying her that her divorce application had been officially approved. Her mood immediately improved. When Mr. and Mrs. Ki-dong left, they passed by a baby store. Mrs. Ki-dong wanted to buy a stroller as a gift for Sarin, but since she didn't have money with her, she had to turn to Mr. Nam-chun for help. At the company, Sarin received great news. The team leader announced that after her maternity leave, she would be sent to attend the Milan Furniture Fair, as the overseas partner had specifically requested her to be in charge. Sarin was overjoyed, but when she shared the news with Gu-young at home, he strongly opposed it. He said their baby would be less than 100 days old and would need its mother, so she couldn't just leave. Disappointed, Sarin reminded him, "Didn't we agree that after my maternity leave, you would stay home to take care of the baby?" Gu-young argued back, saying that was completely different from her going abroad. Sarin said this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If it were him, would he give it up so easily? The two ended up arguing again. The next morning, Gu-young went to the company to talk with a colleague. He said he was very troubled about Sarin wanting to go to Milan. He had once been determined to always put his wife first, but now he was starting to doubt himself. The colleague advised him that since Sarin was about to give birth, this was the most sensitive time, and he shouldn't make her upset, but should go home and talk things over with her again. After the argument with Gu-young, the pregnant Sarin went alone to Mrs. Young-hee's shop. Seeing her daughter walking heavily with swollen feet, Mrs. Young-hee quickly took off her shoes and massaged her legs. Sarin complained that no sleeping position felt comfortable anymore, and the baby kept kicking. She hadn't expected pregnancy to be this exhausting. Mrs. Young-hee comforted her, saying that it was precisely because of those 10 hard months that the child would be even more precious. She added that no matter how much money someone offered, she would never trade her daughter for anything. That night, Gu-young came home. Calmly, he suggested that he and Sarin think carefully about the Milan trip together to decide what would be best for both of them and for the baby. Sarin agreed. The next day, they went to the hospital for a prenatal checkup. The doctor informed them that Sarin needed to be hospitalized immediately. Because her amniotic fluid was low and the placenta had dropped, The doctor recommended that she undergo surgery soon to ensure safety. The news terrified Sarin. That evening at home, she sat blankly on the sofa. Guyoung came over to comfort her, saying that giving birth was a woman's duty, something every woman had to go through, and as long as the baby was healthy, she shouldn't worry too much. Exhausted, Sarin sighed that from pregnancy to childbirth, nothing had gone the way she wanted. At that moment, Sarin received a message from Mrs. Kidong, saying that she and her husband would take care of buying the stroller for their grandchild and telling her to just focus on giving birth without worrying about anything else. Reading the message, Sarin couldn't help but smile. After everything she had gone through, it seemed that at this very moment, she was finally ready, mentally and emotionally, to become a mother.